David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's April. It's day 1 of 30 of the new 30 days to stop the spread, the new shutdown of the U.S. in states that are participating. I'll update you daily on the numbers for the time being. Official coronavirus death toll globally, as of this morning, 876,000. The official death toll, 43,533. In the U.S., we officially have over 188,000 cases and 4,059 deaths. The latest modeling from IHME expects the U.S. death toll to be 93,765. That's updated daily based on actual case data. It will be a difficult month. We knew they would do it, and now it's starting. The next war or battle lines on the disinformation propaganda that is being spread from the factless Trumpist right is to claim that the coronavirus death toll is fake. Now, what's amazing, or maybe not, is that there is a real story about an inaccurate coronavirus death toll. But the story is that the real death toll is probably higher than the official count, not lower. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's go through first what's being said so that we all understand this. First, we had no cases. And because we weren't testing, Donald Trump bragged, we continue to have few cases, and other countries are starting to have more cases. Of course, eventually testing started to ramp up, and the case numbers started to go up, and they started to tell us, well, our case numbers are going to increase artificially quickly because we are doing so much testing. It's still not a reason to be alarmed. Now, that's partially true, but the case number, which is now closing in on 200,000 cases in the U.S., it still understates the real number of cases because not everybody's getting tested. But one thing you can't fake is the death toll, right? Which is now around 4,000. The deaths are deaths no matter how much you are testing, right? Well, maybe or maybe not. There's now a concerted propaganda disinformation effort to claim that the death toll is being exaggerated. How could that possibly be? Well, they say, and I'll show you exactly who they are in a moment, they say that people are actually dying of other stuff, but doctors are lying and saying it was coronavirus. There's a sort of spectrum of the level of crazy that different people are presenting with this, but that's the general idea. Let's look at some examples. Here are Diamond and Silk. Trump loves these two ladies, very, very dangerous propagandists. Take a look.
In a matter of 2 weeks, over 1,000 people supposedly died from the coronavirus. In a 2 weeks time period, over 1,000 people, after being tested positive, have died from the coronavirus. But it took 39 days from January all the way up to February the 29th, I believe. That's
for
Saturday.
the first person.
For the first person to die. Here's another thing.
Come on.
Here's another thing. My president said on March the 24th, Tuesday, this past week, my president said that he would love for America to be back up and running.
I knew this was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I knew
He said
after
that.
he said this,
Wait.
this was going to happen. Go ahead.
At the time he said it, there was 25,489 cases with 307 deaths. Instantaneously, you had the media calling President Trump out. He wanted open by Easter. He want this open by Easter. Me and you were talking. I said, now watch the numbers of deaths go up.
Right.
Watch everything increase because they wanted to make it look bad.
That's right.
In front of our eyes.
They want to make it look bad. So they are faking the death numbers. Imagine their disbelief. How did 1,000 people die? Well, it's 3,000, it's 4,000. It's called a virus. It grows virally. Going viral comes from this, from how quickly it accelerates. That is the whole origin of the term. This act, by the way, this counts what I just played for you. That counts as political analysis to some people on the right. Donald Trump himself, Don Jr., They love Diamond and Silk. They think that they're brilliant. And this is, of course, so disrespectful and disgusting to the families of the thousands of people who have died here in the United States. Now, here's another example. This is right-wing radio host Mark Levin, a very well-known bomb thrower, saying essentially the same thing. I mean, questioning that the death toll is really accurate.
When you look at the mortality rate that they say is a direct result of this virus, they say, then you see the percentage of people who die from the virus going down, as you might imagine. We've talked about this last week. Plus, I cannot find anywhere the definition of what it means to die from this virus. In other words, if I go into the hospital and I already have a very, very bad heart, and I'm not given a whole lot of time, then I get this virus, and it puts me over the edge. Is that counted as dying from heart failure, heart disease, a heart attack, if you have one, or the virus? I don't know.
Mark Levin is acting like this is something unique to the virus, but it's not. I mean, I'll talk to you in a moment, but this is an issue with the flu. This is an issue with AIDS. We'll get to that in a moment. Here's Bill Mitchell, right-wing Trumpist radio host, who tweeted, "How many people are dying from COVID-19? God only knows literally, but the numbers being reported aren't accurate." So let's talk sense here. Dr. Anthony Fauci has addressed this issue in some recent interviews. This is a respiratory disease. If you die from pneumonia complications and you tested positive for the virus, that's a coronavirus death, and it should be counted as such, not for political purposes, but for tracking purposes, for medical purposes, for epidemiology purposes. It's pneumonia caused by coronavirus. If you have organ failure caused by the virus, you died of the virus, and that's how it should be tracked. So they are now simply saying, nah, you can't believe the death toll. It's literal gaslighting. Now, this is an issue. This was an issue and still is to some degree with AIDS. This is an issue of the flu. It's not unique to coronavirus. There's always this issue of, I mean, listen, is someone literally dying of the flu, or are they dying from pneumonia caused by the flu, or a complication caused by the flu, or, a blood marker insufficiency caused by the flu? It's a flu death, and there's always an issue of whether we're attributing enough deaths to some of these viruses. Now, let me take the opportunity to tell you something else. We probably do have an issue about the number of deaths that's being reported, but the issue is not that we are over-reporting. The real issue is we are under-reporting, because we know that there are people dying of presumptive case of coronavirus. Not all presumptive cases are being counted. Sometimes people don't get tested. You can test them post-mortem to find out if they had the virus, but often it's not being done because the bodies are literally piling up in tragic dystopian fashion. Those should be counted as coronavirus deaths. Many of them are not. So if the death toll can't be trusted, it's because it's too low, not because it's too high. Don't fall for it. Don't let them propagate this nonsense. Hey, this is super interesting because it's a sort of perfect blend of political propaganda, but also of Donald Trump's fragile psychological state. As we all know, Donald Trump was woefully late to the coronavirus preparedness game. He was behind on taking it seriously. He was behind on procuring supplies. He was behind on shutting things down. He's just been behind. We had our first case on January 20th. South Korea had their first case on January 19th, essentially the same day. And yet South Korea immediately developed a test, isolated people, did mass testing, quarantined people, did contact tracing. They still don't have 200 deaths from the virus. Meanwhile, we had over 900 deaths just yesterday. Part of it is because Donald Trump has failed us. But here's the psychological part. Donald Trump always wants to blame someone else. And in fact, he's been asked a number of times, do you take responsibility for this or that? No, I don't take responsibility, he has told us. But in order to blame someone else for the coronavirus response, he's implicitly admitting that the response was slow or inadequate. So yesterday during the White House coronavirus press briefing, a reporter asked Donald Trump a brilliant question from a psychological perspective. And it's brilliant because it really baited Trump into having to make a decision on the spot. The reporter asked, did impeachment back in January distract you from coronavirus? Now, I'm going to play Trump's answer for you. But what happens is amazing. Again, from the point of view of analyzing Trump's psyche, Trump gets this look on his face where it's almost like a light bulb goes off, where he says, hey, wait a second. I could blame Democrats for this. I could say, yeah, that's right. The phony impeachment hoax did distract me from coronavirus. It's the Dems' fault, except if Trump does that, he's implicitly admitting he was distracted. He's admitting by default that the response was not what it could have been. He can blame Democrats. He's been given a get out of jail free card here. But to do that, he has to admit that he didn't have the best response. And ultimately, Trump does admit that he was distracted by impeachment. Now, whether it's true or not, we don't really know. Kind of doubt it. But Trump is calculating in real time. Hey, wait a second. Maybe I can say, OK, fine. Maybe the response wasn't good, but it was because of Democrats. Check it out.
Mr. McConnell had a line today. He was on Mitch McConnell, yeah. He said that impeachment diverted the attention of the government. Do you think that in any way, this was happening and building at the same time, did it divert your attention or your team's attention or the vice president's attention?
Well, I don't like to think I did. I think I handled it very well, but I guess it probably did. I mean, I got impeached. I think, I certainly devoted a little time to thinking about it, right? So, but think of it. It was a hoax. It was a total hoax. And when you think that I got impeached only because they had a majority in the House, they didn't get one Republican vote, 196 to nothing, not one Republican. I don't think it's ever happened. The Republicans stuck together, and they stuck together in the Senate 52 to a half.
This just brilliantly twists Trump into a sort of pretzel. And later he says, well, even though I was distracted, I don't really know that I could have done anything differently. He's saying, yeah, well, sort of, I was distracted. I was impeached and it was a hoax and Democrats are bad and it's Democrats that affected my response. But still, my response was as good as it could have been and I couldn't have done anything more quickly. Trump's actual answer is worthless here as a factual inquiry. But it is gold as a window into Trump's psyche, which is the light bulb goes off and he gets this idea, hey, wait a second, I can blame Democrats for this. And Trump, of course, wants to do that. But he still has to argue that despite being distracted by impeachment, he wasn't distracted enough to do anything wrong on coronavirus response. It's incredible. And it is quite a window into Donald Trump's desperation to figure out how can he untwist himself from this intractable situation where he was slow. The response was a joke. His communications have been disproportionately propaganda every once in a while with some kind of action item sprinkled in there. And an excellent job by the reporter whose name escapes me, and I apologize. I really should be naming him because he did a really good job there. Very, very interesting. We have a very full show for you today. I want to remind you on April 9th, that's next Thursday, okay? We are doing a one-day membership bomb. I'm going to share something with you that is not good news. It's April 1st, so now we have our March numbers. 389 people canceled memberships in March, okay? That's by far the worst cancellation month we've ever had. And it's because of the virus. People are having to tighten the belt. People are canceling what is certainly discretionary spending. And I get that that's what we are as an independent media show. But we've got to do something because we want to, we've lost a couple of advertisers. The membership thing is tough. So we want to do something to try to sort of fight back and really try to even this out. So on April 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, we're going to send out an email to everybody on our newsletter mailing list with the biggest discount code of the year. We want to try to have this one-day membership bomb to try to win back some of the support that we knew it would eventually happen, and it did start to happen in those last couple of weeks of March. So please sign up for our newsletter at davidpakman.com. You just put in your email address. You don't have to email me. You do it on my website, davidpakman.com. Get on the newsletter. Thursday, April 9th, you'll get that email from me, and hopefully we can recover some of that lost ground.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Chris Casares and Chris Kiefer. Thanks to both Chris's for signing up at joinpakman.com. Also want to say thank you today to a longtime sustainer. Michael Anderson has been a member almost 5 years and is today's sustaining member of the day. Thanks, Michael. Very much appreciate it. Grab a membership. It's quick. It's easy at joinpakman.com. Always available is a coupon code that saves you 40% if you want the discount. That discount code is ThisIs2020. Here's an interesting sort of a political story. It's a break. This is a political show. It's a break from the virus coverage. And it's about Democratic New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's getting crushed by a portion of the left that widely supported her for a long time, at least until recently. And the reason AOC is getting crushed is she is taking what she sees as a more pragmatic approach to the progressive movement. And it's a really, really interesting story that has divided the online progressive left over the last few days. This all started because there are a whole bunch of primary challenges by progressive Democratic candidates against more centrist Democratic incumbents. AOC hasn't endorsed many of those progressive challengers. She's chosen a couple of sort of easy ones in Texas and Illinois, where the opponents are really conservative Democrats who oppose abortion. But otherwise, AOC has stayed out of a lot of these races. AOC has also had quite a bit of turnover in her staff. A lot of those sort of outspoken young progressive activists that were working for AOC have been replaced with some more moderate, professional, political strategist Democrats that often work with incumbent Democrats. Now, there are questions increasingly about whether AOC campaigned enough for Bernie before Super Tuesday's results that hurt Bernie, and the second Super Tuesday and the third Super Tuesday, and the virus ultimately keeping people at home. And AOC has also publicly shifted from being very antagonistic towards Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic Speaker of the House, to being more publicly laudatory and positive towards Nancy Pelosi. And a lot of people have jumped on her for this. AOC has also jumped into criticizing Bernie supporters for online harassment. That's been mostly the purview of centrist Democrats and Biden supporters and sort of DNC folks. But AOC has said, yeah, a lot of that online harassment is not good. She said some of Bernie's allies are too conflict-based. That also rubbed a lot of Bernie supporters the wrong way. AOC also launched a PAC earlier this year, which is not looking to primary centrist Democrats. It's focused on flipping red states to blue. The goal of AOC's PAC is not to find centrist Democrats and replace them. It's to find red seats and turn them blue, replacing Republicans with Democrats. Now, I have to tell you, this makes me see AOC as much more clever and shrewd politically, as a political operative, than I imagined. You guys, many of you, criticize me occasionally for saying, hey, AOC has a lot of the right ideas, but not the right political practicality, not the right political approach. I see that as changing here. Now, there's lots of people that are furious about this. TYT host Cenk Uygur has gone after AOC for this. A bunch of others have. But let's think this through. First of all, almost everyone changes when they get elected. And this is why I always say, don't deify or glorify individual politicians. They are all elected by the system we currently have. And essentially every single one of them, to some degree, it varies, but to some degree, when they become elected officials under that system, they will start to reinforce or defend to some degree, some elements of the system that got them elected once they get into power. That applies to just about everybody. It doesn't mean that they flip and abandon their values. That's not what I'm saying. But that's not the important analysis for me. The important analysis for me is that we just got done talking about. Bernie lost not because his ideas are bad, but because a lot of the people around him are toxic, because of his relationship with those in positions of power, because the country just isn't as overtly left as Bernie Sanders. For the last 6 weeks, we've been saying, many of us, the future of the progressive movement is in somebody with Bernie's sensibilities, Bernie's values, many of Bernie's policy goals, but who has a better team around them, fewer toxic people, better branding, none of this democratic socialist stuff. The revolution language is not particularly useful to Bernie. AOC isn't changing her political positions here. Her view on Medicare for all hasn't changed. Her view on the Green New Deal hasn't changed. She's changing her approach, maybe. At least that's what it seems like. This is what we've been talking about, guys. We don't need someone who differs from Bernie on core values. Bernie has the right core values. AOC shares Bernie's core values. Nothing has changed as far as that goes. AOC is doing exactly what Bernie didn't do. AOC is doing something to get around what ultimately led to Bernie getting crushed on Super Tuesday and then more on Super Tuesday 2 and more on Super Tuesday 3. People keep saying, hey, we need Bernie's ideas with better framing, packaging, and public relations. That's what AOC is leaning towards here. AOC is looking to become a force for change by building these relationships where in the next 6 years, 8 years, she could have a long laundry list of legislative accomplishments. She's working within the system to invoke change. Now, that's an area of disagreement. Bernie has more of an approach of destroying the system, revolution, and then rebuilding it from the ground up. Working within the system has gotten us many important things. Gay marriage, Violence Against Women Act, food stamps, Social Security, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, pre-existing conditions coverage, and being on your parents' insurance until age 26, labor laws, birth control. Now, has it been enough? No. No way in hell. Has it also led to bad things? Of course. I mean, look at the Iraq War. The Iraq War is the epitome of working within the system with centrist Democrats. In great part, that got us the Iraq War. But when I see AOC step away from some of the absolutism of Bernie, my feeling is this will help her get things done rather than being able to say, we tried this, but we failed. We didn't actually get to do it. I believe this better positions AOC to actually get things done. To me, this suggests AOC's political instincts are better than I thought. I underestimated her political instincts until I saw this. I'm ready to get crushed, my friends. I'm ready for people to disagree. Tell me all the ways in which I am wrong. But this actually improves my opinion of AOC dramatically. Here's a really important political story that crosses the virus story. It crosses 2020 election. It crosses the Democratic primary storyline, separation of powers. Really, a lot of stories are involved here. Democratic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is now calling for the country to vote by mail, period. Now, of course, with coronavirus raging and ravaging the country as we now get into the phase of the pandemic where the daily death toll is staggering, there are more and more questions about what's the rest of the Democratic primary going to look like, but also what's the November election going to look like. A bunch of Democratic primaries have already been postponed because of the virus. Some states have already decided they are going to vote by mail, or rather, some states already vote by mail. Others are trying to figure out what can they do to get going in that direction. But eventually we're going to get to the November general election. Now, I've received dozens and dozens of emails from people saying, is Trump going to try to postpone the election in November? Is Trump going to try to use the virus to stay in office indefinitely? Will it be safe to go out and vote in November? Won't the Trumpists who don't take the virus seriously go out and vote, whereas Democrats who are more likely to take the virus seriously will stay home, helping Donald Trump to get reelected? Well, of course, the answer is we should be able to vote by mail. And Nancy Pelosi is now saying that's exactly what should happen, which is going to become one of the biggest political fights since impeachment. Here is Nancy Pelosi saying it on MSNBC yesterday.
In terms of the elections, I think that we'll probably be moving to vote by mail. That's why we wanted to have more resources in this third bill that just was signed by the president to get those resources to the states to facilitate the reality of life. that we are going to have more vote by mail, and would hope that we would have also some funding, which was rejected, for the Postal Service, which will implement the vote by mail, as well as implementing right now, getting equipment to where it needs to be.
So that's very clear. She says we need to vote by mail. The problem is Republicans don't want this. Trump doesn't want this. Trump actually said this week, vote by mail is one of the package of ideas that Democrats wanted in the stimulus bill that would hurt Republicans.
I will tell you this. If you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy and had nothing to do with workers that lost their jobs.
One of those crazy things that Democrats wanted in the bill that would make it so Republicans don't win is people voting by mail. They had things, levels of voting, that if you agreed to it, Republicans wouldn't win ever again, said Donald Trump. So they know that when more people vote, it's not good for Republicans. So let's talk about how this applies to the November election. We know Democrats are taking stay-at-home orders more seriously than Republicans. We know Democrats are taking the coronavirus more seriously than Republicans. If that continues, if the pandemic persists and you have to vote in person, more Democrats are going to stay home, and that will allow Trumpists to likely get Donald Trump reelected because they are more likely to be ignoring stay-at-home orders if they even have them in their states. So this is going to be a major fight. It's good that Nancy Pelosi is bringing this up. This should not be controversial. We've had absentee ballots for years. Absentee ballots are a form of vote by mail. Some people are able to do it because they can justify it. They're either going to be away, unable to vote in person for whatever other reason. We're talking just about expanding absentee voting to everyone. We have the system. They are going to argue, Republicans, that it's too short notice. We simply can't do it. We have the systems in place. States already have vote by mail in the sense of absentee ballots. We're simply saying allow everyone to get an absentee ballot. This is another reason why Trump wants to open things back up. If things are open, it's harder to justify vote by mail. If things remain closed because of the pandemic, if states are still under stay-at-home orders or sort of shutdown guidelines, it is more likely that Nancy Pelosi would be able to get her way on vote by mail. Would be actually a fantastic modernization of our election system to switch to 100% vote by mail. People don't need to go stand in line all bunched together, spending sometimes hours in line voting. Vote by mail. It makes sense. Trump and Republicans know it's an existential threat for Trump's second term, so they will do everything they can to prevent it, but we should do it. We'll continue to cover this and other stories from today's show on the David Pakman Show Instagram page at David Pakman Show. While you're on Instagram, make sure you're following me for the latest coronavirus boredom updates on my Instagram page, david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I think you're likely to find this next story either absolutely disgusting or hilarious, depending on whether your instinct is to laugh or cry in these horrible situations. There's this guy named Rich Lowry. Rich Lowry is widely considered to be one of the smart conservatives by some, okay? But there's a contingent that says this is one of the smart conservatives. He's an alternative to cartoonish right-wingers like the Fox News people and Stephen Miller and whatever. Rich Lowry is the editor of the National Review. It's a sort of establishment right-wing publication. And Rich tweeted yesterday, and this is when I realized satire was dead for the right. Like the right doesn't understand satire. Rich Lowry tweeted, Trump rightfully slamming the just the flu argument at this briefing, referring to Trump yesterday saying during his press briefing, this is not the flu, this is vicious. This was Trump's own lie. Rich Lowry is praising Trump for slamming the lie that Trump propagated just a few days ago and certainly for several weeks. And it's a lie which is now repeated by millions of Trumpists who are ignoring all social distancing guidelines. Trump is the one who from the beginning was making this seemingly innocuous comparison. It's sort of like the flu. Remember, Trump tweeted on March 9th. So last year, 37,000 Americans died from the flu. It averages 27 to 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. We've got 546 confirmed cases of the virus with 22 deaths. Think about that. Here is video of Trump saying this could be called a flu just 4 days ago. This was not in February. This was 4 days ago.
Pandemic by this disease, whatever they want to call it. You can call it a germ, you can call it a flu, you can call it a virus. You can call it many different names. I'm not sure anybody even knows what it is.
Here's Trump talking about it like the flu for weeks.
Started washing my hands. So you have to do that. This is, I really think, Doctor, you want to treat this like you treat the flu, right? And, it's going to be fun.
Anyway, you all know this. I don't have to play 10 clips of it, but it's Trump who kept inserting into the narrative flu, flu, flu. And here is Trump yesterday saying, hey, guys, this is not the flu. This is vicious.
People with great, actually, common sense, they said, why don't we write it out? A lot of people have said, a lot of people have thought about it. Write it out. Don't do anything. Just write it out and think of it as the flu. But it's not the flu. It's vicious.
And then in comes Rich Lowry and again says Trump rightfully slamming the just the flu argument at this briefing. This is like praising someone for putting out a fire that they deliberately started. This is like punching someone in the face and saying, I didn't punch you twice, you've got to give me some credit for not having punched you a second time. This guy is a supposed smart conservative. Have fun with that one. So I think what we have to realize here is when we point this stuff out, here's the important message. Okay. A lot of people, when they first hear it's like the flu, or they hear Fox News say the airports are empty, this is a great time to be flying, or they hear Devin Nunes, Republican congressman from California, say this is a great time to go to restaurants because the restaurants are wide open. You'll very easily be able to find a seat. When we hear all that stuff and then it gets worse and the guidelines change, there are a lot of people who do a sort of pick your, it's like a choose your own adventure, pick whichever position you like. Trump has now said 20, 30 times, it's sort of like the flu in different ways. It's a flu. We don't shut down for the flu, whatever. Yesterday, he says, this is not the flu. This is vicious. Millions of Americans are continuing to sort of rely upon the 20 or 30 times Trump said it is like the flu in some way, shape, or form, to continue not social distancing, to continue going out there, congregating in large groups. I know that, here in Massachusetts, we are now halfway through week 3 of doing this. People are taking it seriously. Almost everything's closed. Nobody's going to school. The streets are widely empty. People at grocery stores are being very, very careful. There are still states at this point that are barely doing anything. And I know that there are people in red states who listen to the show who write to me and say, David, even though our state hasn't done anything, within my city, we have done stuff. The mayor, that's great. Okay, that's fantastic. But there are millions and millions of people. It's estimated to be 25% of the total population or more, right? We're talking about 85 million people. We have 340 million people in this country. 25% would be about 85 million people who are still not doing any kind of social distancing. And this is the sort of reason why. So we've got to be much more vigilant about it. We're fighting. Trump wants to consider himself a wartime president when it comes to fighting the virus. I don't know whether that's the right language to be using, but a real battle that is being fought is the battle against disinformation, which is just spreading virally from the right. And we're going to continue following it and fighting it as best we can. So it's still very, very early, and we want to be really careful not to overstate the promise or the potential of any one treatment for coronavirus. But I did want to update you about chloroquine. We have news that the FDA has approved on an emergency use basis the use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine from the Strategic National Stockpile to look at using it to treat coronavirus in some patients. Now, I want to be really clear here because there's so many people misunderstanding this because Donald Trump has been overselling it. There are many possible treatments being looked at, okay? We've got chloroquine with and without azithromycin. We've got remdesivir. We have a combination of 2 different HIV drugs with and without azithromycin. We've got some antibody treatments, convalescent plasma or plasma, as Donald Trump referred to it a few days ago. Dozens of other possibilities, drugs in development. There's dozens and dozens of things going on. Trump has been overselling chloroquine with azithromycin for a couple of weeks now. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been careful not to oversell it. It is not a proven treatment. The letter that we now have seen from the FDA, which does approve this for some emergency use, is also very cautious to say that this is not a drug approved for treating coronavirus. The FDA goes on to say, based upon limited in vitro and anecdotal clinical data in case series, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine sulfate are currently recommended for treatment of hospitalized coronavirus patients in several countries, and a number of national guidelines report incorporating recommendations regarding use of it in the setting of COVID-19. The FDA encourages the conduct and participation in randomized, controlled clinical trials that may produce evidence concerning the effectiveness in treating coronavirus. The FDA is issuing an emergency use. I don't remember what A stands for, but the idea of allowing emergency use to facilitate the availability of chloroquine during the pandemic to treat patients for whom a clinical trial is not available or participation is not feasible. So making clear that we're not approving the drug for chloroquine, we're approving the drug for discretionary emergency use when the patient can't participate in a clinical trial. It goes on to say, having concluded that the criteria for issuance of this authorization is met, I am authorizing the emergency use as described in the scope of authorization for treatment of coronavirus when clinical trials are not available or participation is not feasible. So we are waiting on results from what are called randomized controlled trials. What we have so far, as a number of small trials have shown, is conflicting information. We have some small sample sizes that say the chloroquine treatment has worked well. We have other small samples that say, the people who didn't get it did just as well as the people who did. And as Anthony Fauci has pointed out, you have to be comparing the new treatment to some standard of care. And you need to be randomizing it. Just because we've found some small studies with a correlation does not mean that we have found a causal link. And case in point, when you see just as many studies that say the control group did just as well, you have to question the value of this as a therapeutic treatment. We need a large, properly done, randomized, controlled trial. Until we get that, we won't really know. So the FDA, I believe, is doing the right thing here. It seems that the side effects and the risks are reasonable, assuming that you're getting an EKG of patients that you're going to give this treatment to. Chloroquine can affect what's called the QT-QTC interval. It's a heart-related thing. The FDA says in limited situations, it can be tried when you can't get access to a clinical trial. Doing the EKG is a very important thing. It's a constant balance of risk, reward, side effects, and the impact of not trying it when things start to get very, very dire. Meanwhile, there are also people who are taking chloroquine for the actual approved uses who are now having trouble getting it because many countries are starting to stockpile chloroquine. That's another issue which we'll talk about at another time, but everything has a cost is the point. Let's take a quick break. Much more coming up right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have newly released audio of Donald Trump, and the audio exposes Donald Trump, I guess, pretending during a call with governors that he hadn't heard about coronavirus testing being a problem. Now, you know, and I know that lack of testing has been a problem for months now. It's been a topic at almost every single White House coronavirus press briefing. But Trump is, I guess, gaslighting governors, saying testing, people can't get tests. I haven't heard anything about that lately. So this call took place Monday. This was with governors from a number of the different states, and Montana governor, Democratic governor in a red state, Steve Bullock, explained, we don't have tests. And Trump says, I haven't heard about that issue. Testing's a problem. So let's go to the first clip. You're going to hear Dr. Anthony Fauci in the audio, and you'll hear Governor Steve Bullock, and then you're going to hear Trump. So first, Fauci is explaining to Bullock, what you want to do is you want to test people and then contact trace people. And Bullock says contact tracing, we don't even have, we're almost out of tests here. Take a listen.
Do you have any system in place that you feel can adequately identify cases and isolate them and contact trace them, or are the capabilities and resources there that that's not something that you can do given with what you have?
Yes, Dr. Fauci, we are trying to do contact tracing, but literally we are one day away if we don't get test kits from the CDC that we wouldn't be able to be tested in Montana. We have gone time and time again to the private side of this, the private market, and where the private market is telling us is that it's the national resources that are then taking our orders apart. Basically, so we're getting our orders canceled. And that's for PPE, that's for testing supplies, that's for testing equipment. So while we're trying to do all the contact tracing, we don't have adequate tests to necessarily do it. We don't have the PPE along the way, and we're not finding markets to be able to do that.
So understand, Dr. Fauci is saying, you know, what you would want to be doing is when people test positive, you've got to isolate them. And then you've got to do contact tracing in Montana, figure out who they've been in touch with and isolate those people. This is how South Korea did it. They had their first case essentially within hours of the United States having its first confirmed case. And they dealt with the virus successfully, still not even 200 deaths total in South Korea. And Governor Steve Bullock says contact tracing, we're like a day or two from having no tests at all and having no PPE left, personal protective equipment. So now we continue with the same audio, and you'll hear Donald Trump jump in and say, I haven't heard about testing being a problem.
Along the way are private suppliers. So we do have to rely on a national chain of distribution, or we're not going to get it. But we are doing our best to try to do exactly that. In, like, Gallatin County would be an example where we have almost half of our overall states. Those are the positives. So we're trying to shift the supplies to really isolate that and do the contact tracing, but we just don't have enough supplies to do the testing.
Tony, you can answer it if you want, but I haven't heard about testing in weeks. We've tested more now than any nation in the world. We've got these great tests, and we come out with another one tomorrow where it's almost instantaneous testing. But I haven't heard about testing being a problem.
That version of Trump that we see at the briefings, where he says, hey, we're testing more than anybody else, we've got the best tests, that is apparently not a character. That appears to be the real Donald Trump that shows up to the governor's conference calls as well and says, testing, I don't know about any problem with testing. We have people waiting 8 days for test results. And anecdotally, we have people waiting even longer if and when they can get a test, which not everybody can. There are hundreds of people, thousands of people who are recovering from the virus before they even get their test results, if you can believe it, because that's how long it's taking. Do you guys think that Trump is even thinking about this stuff between press briefings? Like, I like to imagine, that a president is working all day on this, despite having, an almost totally clear schedule, which Donald Trump has had. But then he comes out with this testing. I haven't heard about any kind of testing issues for weeks. And you have to wonder, is he just doing Golf Simulator and eating his famous taco salads all day and not thinking about this whatsoever? He even talked about testing this week. He was asked about testing this week by reporters. It led to the entire per capita, 38 million people live in Seoul, South Korea embarrassment. How can he say he hasn't heard anything about testing for weeks? A reporter asked him about it the same day or the day before that this conference call took place. So the question, as often is the question with Donald Trump, is he merely ignorant? Is he impaired and his memory is failing him? Is he just lying to governors and gaslighting them? What do you think is going on here? What do you believe explains Trump saying, I haven't heard anything about testing for weeks now? We've talked about the scam grifting around the virus. And we previously mentioned this super rich televangelist scammer, Kenneth Copeland. Copeland's 83 years old. He's built a net worth of $760 million, if you can believe it, on the backs of scamming poor Christians out of money. Now, poor might be economically poor or cognitively poor, or I don't, you can interpret that however you want, but it has afforded Kenneth Copeland private jets and houses and cars and the whole thing for this guy. We have a new clip of him finishing coronavirus by commanding God to destroy it. So we're going to look at the clip. If you're listening today on the radio or to the audio podcast, I encourage you, go and find the YouTube clip for this story because the visual is really important. You're going to see Copeland behaving like a lunatic, but he also has another guy next to him. It's almost like a hype man at a lectern next to him, sort of repeating some of the things Copeland says, egging on the insanity. It's really, really crazy. And remember, for Kenneth Copeland to do this stuff, you've got to keep tithing. You have to keep sending him 10% of your income. Take a look at this.
In the name of Jesus. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Standing in the office of the prophet of God, I execute judgment on you, COVID-19. Oh, I execute judgment on you, Satan, you destroyer, you killer. You get out. We break your power. You get off this nation. I demand judgment on you. I demand a vaccination to come immediately.
Yes.
It actually makes me physically uncomfortable to watch this stuff. It's not like a cringe reaction. It's almost like a GI distress. Like I start to get nauseous watching this stuff. And of course, all of the normal contradictions. Satan brought the virus, so he commands God to destroy it. Why didn't God merely prevent the virus in the first place? He's asking for a vaccine. Well, who makes the vaccine? Is it God? Why would God allow the virus and then make a vaccine? Why not just prevent the virus to begin with? Seems simpler to me. Oh, David, come on. God works in mysterious ways, and you've got to keep sending Kenneth Copeland money. Let's watch a little bit more of this, if we can tolerate it.
I call you done. I call you gone. You come down from your place of authority, destroyer. You come down and you crawl on your belly like God commanded you when he put his foot on your head in the Garden of Eden.
What really gets me about this is that in this context where this guy has like a congregation, I guess you'd call it, or maybe it's a ministry, I don't know. In this context, this guy's wearing a suit and there's cameras in the room and he says, send me money for these rants. There's no practical difference in terms of what this guy is saying between Kenneth Copeland wearing a suit in front of cameras and, a guy ranting in the subway who should be committed to a psych ward. And I'm not saying that pejoratively about the guy in the subway. We're talking about mental illness here, right? The difference is one guy's wearing a suit, the other guy's not. One guy has cameras filming him, the other one does not. One guy has marketing behind him saying you should be sending in money for this stuff, the other guy does not. That's the only material difference here. Now, some people would disagree with me and would say, David, Kenneth Copeland's not crazy, he's just evil. He knows that this stuff is lies. He's doing it not because he believes it and he's crazy. He's doing it just to steal people's money. I don't disagree. The point is, the rhetoric is the type of stuff that paranoid schizophrenics in psych wards would normally say. He may well be acting just to get people's money, no doubt about it, but The only real difference is the marketing, the PR, and Kenneth Copeland has better lighting than the guy ranting on the street corner. If these faith healers really had the powers, go to a hospital and heal someone seriously ill from COVID-19, right? Go and put your hands and say your prayers for someone on a ventilator and heal them. It would be immoral not to if this nonsense actually worked. Then we'd have something to talk about. Really sad that old folks keep getting scammed. They keep going out, they're getting haircuts, they're hanging out at malls, they're ignoring social distancing rules. And part of it is they can send this guy cash to pray away the virus. Part of it is, watching Fox News and the rhetoric there. It's very, very ugly stuff. And it's not a joke. It's not a joke. People are actually dying as a result of this. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. I have the rare praise voicemail today. This is just a beautiful message of uplifting praise. Very, very rare. If you listen to my voicemails, you would understand just how rare it is. Take a listen.
Hey, David, this is John from New York. I just wanted to take this time out to thank you genuinely for the work you've done thus far on covering the pandemic crisis and the daily presidential briefings in particular. It's been useful for someone to provide perspective and even a bit of levity in these dire days and times.
Yeah.
So many thanks. Keep fighting a good fight and know that you have our support. All right. Bye.
Beautiful message from John. That was not a plant. Just it's really great to hear that. And we've been doing the daily press briefings. I've been live streaming them and providing commentary. There is some debate about whether I should start skipping the Trump propaganda part at the beginning. Just mute that and turn the volume up when the doctors actually start speaking. We'll see what people think today on stream. But yeah, come on down and join me for the live streams. Let me remind you, Thursday, April 9th, we are going to try to do a membership bomb in March because people are tightening belts. It's a bad economic situation. We had 389 membership cancellations in March. This was the most we've ever had in any month. Okay. So I don't want anybody's last dollar. Times are tough. We get it. But we want to avoid having to, reduce staffing, reduce hours, any of that stuff. We want to keep doing more rather than less. So to kind of try to fight back against this, Thursday, April 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, an email will go out to everybody on our mailing list with a special membership coupon code. The idea is that day we want to try to recover as many of these lost members as possible. So I invite you to sign up for my newsletter. Sign up today, davidpakman.com. April 9th, you'll get an email with instructions on how to take advantage of this one-day special. That's the goal. Get signed up, and you'll get access to the bonus show as a member. On today's bonus show, I will have the latest for you on the producer Pat Ford firefighters flood roof collapse fiasco that producer Pat has been dealing with. And I also have optimistic news about Pat's upcoming heroic and triumphant return to the bonus show. All of that and much more on today's bonus show. I'll speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.